The concept of global warming actually exceeds the hottest summer seasons, floods in the winter, and gas emissions from cows. There is an agreement between scientists in general that the Earth's temperature rises rapidly, and the controversy lies whether this warming reflects a natural change in the global temperature or whether it is the result of human pollution since the Industrial Revolution. Evidence clearly indicates that human activity is the main cause of the current global warming, with the exception of some dissident scientists, the defenders of oil companies and the leaders of the most polluted countries. There is a major agreement among scientists who realize the facts that the situation will get worse if the emissions of greenhouse gases are not reduced. Surprisingly, there are some people who reduce the importance of this possibility and try to hide it behind blocking information. One of these people is the Danish statistical Bjørn Lomborg, who mocks the phenomenon of global warming and doubts its influence in the future. Over the past 70 years, the Earth's temperature has increased significantly and this warning has accelerated in recent decades. Climate records show that the hottest years have occurred in modern contracts, not only in the memories of the elderly relatives. The Earth is now warmer more than 90% of its history of 4.6 billion years, and temperatures are expected to rise more by the end of the 21st century than it was during the past 150,000 years. Current warming is not a transient climatic event and cannot be fully explained by the sun's changes. Rather, it is a result of pollution that spoils the Earth with a buffer layer of carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide and other greenhouse gases. Since the 18th century, the extent of the global warming evidence has exceeded multiple changes in the ecosystem, such as high surface temperatures, increased ice melting in the poles and sea level rise. The evidence also includes an increase in the concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, which is linked to human activities such as burning fossil fuels and the manufacture of agricultural fertilizers. Global warming leads to negative effects on the environment and life on Earth. This includes increasing climatic extremism such as violent storms, floods, and dryness, effects on biological diversity and species extinction, and changes in environmental systems such as forests, coral reefs and rivers. To combat global warming, measures must be taken to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and increase dependence on renewable energy sources such as solar energy and wind. Awareness and education about global warming and encouragement of changes in consumer and behavioral patterns must also be promoted to reduce negative effects. In the end, there must be strong global cooperation to face the challenges related to global warming, including adopting and implementing strong climate policies at the international level. We know from the studies conducted on polar samples that before the discovery of steam power and the use of minerals marking the industrial world, the percentage of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere increased by 30%, as well as large increases in other greenhouse gases. Carbon dioxide concentrations in the atmosphere now top of what it was for at least 420,000 years. In addition to this, that the increase in gas has reached an unprecedented level, and during the last 100 years it was greater than ever before for less than 20,000 years. It was not even in the atmosphere for 2 centuries. With the convergence of these gases in the atmosphere of the Earth, they made it, literally, a glass greenhouse that allows the sun's heat to enter the Earth and hinder its return to space. A single one effect cannot be seen, and it should be taken into account before we are attributed to high temperatures to the accumulation of greenhouse gases caused by humans. During that period, the product of the sun varies by about 0.1%. Solar product also changes over longer periods ranging from hundreds to tens of thousands of years. Volcanic revolutions may also have a major impact on the change of the Earth's climate. The major volcanic eruptions are launched huge amounts of sulfur dioxide and other sulfur gases to the stratosphere layer, which has a wide-scale cooling effect by reducing the level of solar radiation that reaches the surface of the Earth. There was a significant decrease in global temperatures, although not long, after the Krizan volcano, Mexico, volcano in 1982, and the Botubo volcano, the Philippines, in 1991. Sometimes the efforts of volcanoes and the sun are combined together to result in long-term climate changes. This period continued from about 1450 AD to the end of the 19th century, and witnessed the formation of frost on the Thames River. It is difficult to try to determine the real difference in global temperatures over the past 1,000 years, especially since the numbers registered for the period before the past 2 centuries are not at all confident. Another problem comes from the fact that high temperatures in a part of the world does not prevent another part whose temperature decreases. One of the arguments that opponents still use the idea that man is the reason for the phenomenon of global warming, that the world has witnessed a visible decrease in temperatures between 1946 and 1975, however, with a careful look at the numbers recorded in this period, in fact, despite the slight decrease in the temperature at that time, the bad news is that this blocking, which is now referred to as a global blackout or darkness, may mean that temperatures will rise what exceeds previous expectations. In all cases, despite this bitter, documented records show that global temperatures were following a rising path that has not been neglected since the documentation of these records began in 1861. The records also indicate that the 90s of the 20th century were the warmer decade since the mid-19th century, and that the year 1998 was the most heated years. The global warming phenomenon struck the country in the summer of 2003, relaxing while the experience works on its own to increase the temperature and take us to an increasing list of unexpected consequences. It is a reduction in global greenhouse gas emissions by 5.2%, lower than 1990 rates, during the period 2008 to 2012. The huge self-accumulated self-deficiency still means that even if we go back to our senses and work to reduce emissions in large proportions in the next few years, the temperatures and seas levels will continue to rise for centuries. A single one effect cannot be seen, and many other factors affect the temperatures of the world. It should be taken into consideration before we attribute the high temperatures to the accumulation of greenhouse gases caused by humans. During that period, the product of the sun varies by about 0.1%. The solar output also changes over longer periods ranging from hundreds to tens of thousands of years, which has a widespread cooling effect by reducing the level of solar radiation that reaches the surface of the Earth. There was a significant decrease in global temperatures, although not long, after the Crizan volcano, Mexico, volcano in 1982, and the Botubo volcano, the Philippines, in 1991. This period continued from about 1450 AD to the end of the 19th century. The world will not be in 2100 AD to be much hotter. Heat during the next 100 years. The Commission was established in 1988 by the United Nations Environment Programme, and it is specialized in providing a consensus of scientific opinion worthy of climate change. The word that concerns us here is a consensus of opinion. Global temperatures have increased by 0.6 degrees Celsius. The worst scenarios of the International Government Authority concerned with climate change expect that the temperatures will be higher than they are now, about 6 degrees Celsius. The transition between the two situations included enormous changes in the Earth's environment. We have all the reasons that make us expect that while the rise in the post-ice age temperature doubles again, but this time there are two important differences. The polar and mountainous areas that have snow and permanent ice are now already suffering. For the past 100 years, there has been a tremendous decline of mountainous ice rivers around the world, and the result is that the Arctic is empty of ice in the summer of 2000. The area of marine ice in the Arctic in the spring and summer season is 10 to 15% less than it was 40 years ago, while the lake ice and rivers in the high areas in the northern hemisphere are now fascinated during the spring 2 weeks ago than it was a century ago. The expectations of the International Government Authority concerned with climate change indicate that the polar and mountainous areas of the hemisphere may rise in the temperature of 8 degrees Celsius by 2100. And if it is more slow until after 2300. relaxing while the experience works on its own to increase the temperature and take us to an increasing list of unexpected consequences. It is a reduction in global greenhouse gas emissions by 5.2%, lower than 1990 rates, during the period 2008 to 2012. The huge self-accumulated self-deficiency still means that even if we go back to our senses and work to reduce emissions in large proportions in the next few years, and many other factors affect the temperatures of the world. There was a significant decrease in global temperatures, although not long, after the Krizan volcano, Mexico, volcano in 1982, and the Botubo volcano, the Philippines, in 1991. This period continued from about 1450 AD to the end of the 19th century. The enormous increase in the snow and ice melting rate resulted in high levels of seas, with the expectation of the levels of seas by 40 centimeters. However, the failure to reduce the emissions of greenhouse gases may lead in the future to a catastrophic melting of the ice panels in both Greenland and Antarctica, and expects the worst scenarios of the international governmental body concerned with climate change: the disappearance of the plate, the iceberg in Greenland, which will result in a 6-meter sea level rise by 3000. You will find all the major coastal cities in the world themselves underwater. While it is expected that the sea level is expected to rise along with the land surface, the surface of the surface will result in 1.8 meters in Bangladesh within only 50 years. It is expected that the number of those affected will increase by up to 200 million by 2080. The problem of sea level rise will not disappear immediately. Sea level will continue to rise for 1,000 years or more. We used to throw all the climate-related natural disasters on the phenomenon of global warming. Although we cannot comfort a specific storm or a specific flood to the high temperature, there is increasing evidence of greater numbers of extremist air phenomena. Australia will suffer from incendiary temperatures. There are only a few people ready to take a risk by saying that what is happening is caused by the phenomenon of global warming. We can refer to a logical relationship. At the same time, we find that the storms are increasingly increased by an increase of 250%, the high waves, about 3 meters, increased by more than a meter compared to what it was 3 decades ago, while the largest high waves increased by 3 meters to reach 10 meters. As for coast erosion, it results in severe damage and now already along many sectors of the most vulnerable coasts in the United Kingdom. Global warming is said to be the reason for this. The entire mountains consisting of billions of tons of rocks may collapse, the temperature increased by 1 or 2 degrees Celsius. In the mountains above the Swiss St. Moritz ski resort, for example, the temperature increased by half a degree within the past 15 years. The continued high temperatures at this rate may shake mountain peaks all over the world. All this and the global warrant has not yet reached its most. We are on a date with other radical and wide changes whose effect on our lives will not be less than the effect of natural disasters. The fabric of our global society will decide on the increasing problems surrounding agriculture. A few countries will be able to adapt to some extent, while temperatures have risen in some places to the necessary extent to the survival and multiplication of mosquitoes that transmit malaria. As for biological diversity, and with one of the tourist sectors, perhaps the worst expectations recently announced that all large reefs will destroy within 50 years, all I have ever had to either have already occurred, and more giant terrestrial collapses. Although it raises attention, the Pavlovan volcano in Alaska is raised to the explosion in the winter when the low weather conditions that pass over the sea cause the sea level to raise the level of the sea by a few dozen centimeters. It exercises increasing pressure on the surrounding sediments, which may lead to stability and the collapse of a huge mass of sediments. And she left sandy deposits inside the thick layers in the swift peat. If global warming continues without hindrance over the next few centuries,